Hey guys, what is up? SuperKmanrocks here, and I am back for my Week 4 LPL review, analysis, and at the end, my power rankings. Of course, last week we took off for the LPL because of Chinese New Year, so we didn't actually have any games to talk about. It has been a little while. We had a shortened Week 3. We have a little bit of a shortened Week 4, although there are still a lot of games to talk about here in Week 4, so I'm excited to get into it. If you're excited to get into it, go ahead and tell me that down in the comments section below. What match were you most excited to see this week, kind of going into all the games? And then, if you really want to be spicy, if you really want to support the channel, you can always throw a like down there while you're there as well. But let's not waste too much time. We've got a lot of stuff to get into this week, so let's jump right into our first series of the week here, and that was Invictus Gaming taking on Rare Atom. Invictus actually taking the 2-0 series win here. A really, really solid win here for Invictus that they kind of needed to start building some momentum. They had an interesting week for sure. But a solid first win here over a Rare Atom team that I think a lot of people have considered at least kind of on the fringe of being in that playoff conversation. It seems like there are a lot of teams kind of vying for that 9-10 playoff spot right now. A lot of teams that feel like they don't even necessarily want it. A lot, we're not 10 teams deep in the LPL right now. And Rare Atom was one of those teams. Invictus might just be up there now with a really convincing win over Rare Atom. They were clearly the better team in this series, basically from minute one. June is going to be my player of the series here. He has been all year. He was hit and miss here, but he hit for the most part. His Viego game in Game 2 was fantastic, but he also played really well on that Xin Zhao in Game 1. Zika coming in, I believe, at the beginning of last week, in the top lane, formerly Daniil, if anyone is familiar with him. He's come in, and he's really been an upgrade for this Invictus Gaming team. Nenny really wasn't doing anything, and I wasn't super high on Nenny going into the year anyways, but Zika's come in and definitely been an upgrade. He was really good in this series, very much outclassed Cube throughout pretty much the entirety of both games, but had an especially good game on that Gwen in Game 1. And then also the other newcomer in here coming in for Zhao Yueji. I actually think both of them have played relatively well, at least in the context of like what Invictus Gaming is expected this year. But has come in and they've certainly been a better team overall. I'm not sure if that's a playstyle thing or just a less resources being thrown that way, but ever since has come into the team has felt a little bit more cohesive, so I like that move as well. Yuukai and Lucas are they're good. They're not having bad starts to the year. They haven't necessarily been driving forces. I was really high on Yuukai coming into the year. I thought really if there was going to be anybody on this IG team that really stood out and kind of had a breakthrough year, it was going to be Yuukai, but so far it hasn't been that. For Rare Atom, it's just not a good series. This team really hinges on the performance of their jungler, and when their jungler isn't winning hard, it just seems pretty doomed for Rare Atom, honestly. iBoy still can get at least a little bit ahead on the Jinx, but really, if he has no peel, it doesn't matter, right? The Jarvan was super far behind, especially top lane was super far behind. Cube is going to be my dud of the series here. A really bad Tryndamere game in Game 1, which is not something you would expect into Gwen. Not a particularly tough matchup for the Tryndamere, and Cube just got completely outclassed. He also lost in Game 2 pretty hard as well. So did Leon, though. Really, I mean, honestly, this entire team just didn't feel super cohesive throughout any point of this series. Cube, he's been really disappointing this year. I thought he was pretty good last year on this team that ended up making a surprise third-place finish in summer. Not in playoffs, obviously, but in regular season. And he's come into 2022, and he's been he's downgraded a lot. I think he has definitely regressed from where he was last year. Maybe he just got a lot of spotlight because the talent around him was better and he didn't have to do as much, but he's been outclassed in lane a lot this year, and he's really been a detriment to this team, so hopefully that doesn't continue for Cube. He was a player I did think was at least a little bit undervalued coming into the year, but maybe not so much. Really the only player on this team, like I said, that's doing anything at the moment is iBoy, and unfortunately iBoy's just not the kind of player that can win you the game by himself. Really, this team is built to have jungle win and to spread that wealth to lanes, and Leon's just not getting advantages right now, and if that's going to happen, I don't really see an avenue for Rare Atom to really be super effective. The addition of Uyanja there in the support role has done virtually nothing to this team. Zora was atrocious when he was in there. He was probably the worst support in the LPL when he was playing. And then Yuyanja's come in. He's also been like a bottom 3 support in the LPL. Maybe he's a little bit more consistent, but outside of that, it still really hasn't been good in that role. Strive has been hit or miss, like I said. Not really. I guess he doesn't miss. He just, when he hits, he doesn't hit hard. And when he misses, he doesn't miss a lot. He's just kind of a meh player right now. And Rare Adam needs more than that. So I'm not really sure exactly the direction this team wants to go in. But for Invictus Gaming, this is a really good win. Then they're going to be happy that they got this one. Jumping into Series 2 here of Day 1, we had JD Gaming taking on Team WE, a pretty dominant 2-0 series win here from JDG. They're really getting back on track. A lot of the momentum that I think that they felt like they should have had going into the year and you know, should have had last year, especially towards the end, I think is really starting to come back for them now. Yes, it's against WE, who is not a very good team, but this was a massacre. This series was never really close at any point. Missing is going to be my player of the series here. Ever since Hope came in here in the bottom lane for LPC, this has been a huge power point on the map for JD Gaming. If they can continue that, if this bot lane can continue to grow together, this team might actually be pretty scary. Kanavi looks to be at least a little bit more so at the beginning of the year back on track. Yagao has actually had sneakily one of the better years of his career, at least starts to the year of his career. And then 369 has just been fine in the top lane. He really hasn't been asked to do a ton. Mostly just playing Kennen over and over and over again. But really, Hope and Missing have been the PowerPoint part of the map for JDG, and Missing, especially in this series, was pretty lights out. That Leona game in Game 2 especially was really, really tough to deal with. Thresh game in Game 1, obviously, as well. His hooks are, you know, just mwah, chef's kiss, right? But this JD Gaming team is just kind of clicking on all cylinders. Like I said, Hope is really, really good. He's kind of been a surprisingly ready player. Usually when you see players come into sides that are trying to win in the LPL, you don't see them be power points of the map, you know, immediately, but he came in and was immediately given the resources from Kanavi, and I think that's a big sign that they trust this kid a lot to really kind of carry the team through. And then obviously Kanavi, you know, he had a really rough start to the year, and he did not have a good 2021. We can definitely say that, but he has really, ever since Hope has come in and kind of, you know, put that part of the map that he can, like, really invest into be a strong point, he has really changed his fortune, I think, a lot in terms of he's stepping up now. He's being more aggressive. He feels more confident in the plays that he's able to make because he knows that even if he doesn't win hard, he can probably have a lane that's going to win hard. And yes, it's into WE, who has probably the worst bot lane in the LPL, but still, it's a good win for this team. As for WE, not a good series, not a good year so far. This brings them to 0-5. They get obliterated here by JDG, who I think, you know, at best is kind of not a low tier playoff team, but a lower tier playoff team, right? They're somewhere in that like 6 to 8 range, probably in terms of teams, and they just got obliterated. They were not even in this series remotely. View is my dud of the series. View has not had a good year. I don't know where Beishang is. You know, wherever he is, I hope he's okay. I just mean, this team it just feels so lost. They feel lost. They don't feel like they have an identity. They don't feel like they have a PowerPoint of the map. Shanks theoretically should be that because he had a really good end of 2021, but, you know, he just hasn't been super effective as the guy on WE this year. You know, last year he had a lot of support, but this year it's not there. You bring in Bubu in the top lane. I've said enough about Bubu. He is a loose cannon. He is uncontrollable. You pick Gwen for him 2 games here. He dies 9 times. Just, it's a rough start to the year for Bubu, but I don't know how you could have expected anything different when you surround a player like that with less than ideal talent. Players like that usually need talent around them for them to be successful, or they at least need, you know, all of the attention. And then Jing and Kadaya are the worst bot lane in the LPL. I don't even think that's really that much of a contention at this point. They're just not a good bot lane at all. So, yeah, WE just not... There's really nothing to say about them that is positive at this point. They haven't shown anything at any point this year. Really, it's just been, you know, sometimes they don't lose as hard. But yeah, this team is not good. I would expect at some point they do have, you know, other players to play here. I would expect at some point a complete roster overhaul. I don't think you can go into summer with this roster still. There isn't really any upside here. I don't think, you know, you have players like Bubu who just really aren't going to improve. Shanks, I guess you could maybe expect some improvement on. You know, View, I guess you're banking on improvement on. I still don't know where Beishang is. And then Jing and Kadaya just don't seem like they'll ever be LPL ready. They don't seem like they have that kind of potential, at least to me. So, I don't know. I don't know what WE would do here, but for JD Gaming, it's a really good win to get them, to continue their hot streak that I think they're kind of on right now. And, definitely continuing to push for some spots that other teams in the LPL who are underperforming occupied in a lot of people's preseason power rankings. Moving on to day 2 here. Kicking off day 2 for us was a series between Ultra Prime and Anyone's Legend. That Anyone's Legend, I think, surprising a lot of people actually takes here in a 2-1 win. They lose the game 1, but they bounce back here for the games 2 and 3. Game 1 was decently controlled by Ultra Prime. Really not a lot of contention there. Cryan had a really good game on the rise, was just able to kind of control the entire map. This was the best of Cryan, especially since he's been to Ultra Prime. He's had kind of a slow start to the year for this team. It's really been Elk and Shousey that have kind of carried the torch for Ultra Prime a lot of the year. But they were not particularly good in this series, which we'll get to. And then games 2 and 3 were really dominated by Anyone's Legends. Kind of to everyone's surprise, this team really kind of showed up and showed out in this series, beating a team that a lot of people, I think, have higher expectations for than losing to, a bottom 3 or 4 team, which is what everybody assumed Anyone's Legend was. I was always a little bit higher on Anyone's Legend, purely because, honestly, Betty has been secretly very good this year. Betty's not someone that I think a lot of people expected to have a good season. He's had a lot of time here in the LPL. He was someone who came in with a lot of fanfare, obviously, from the LMS. And he's come into the LPL, and he's been rather disappointing, I think, overall. But he, this year he's really turned it on. He's been the reason that Anyone's Legend has been super successful. And, he had a really good game 3 here. I don't want to take that away from him. His Zeri game, when that champion gets, ahead, that the game is over. I'll talk about Zeri in a minute, but Betty isn't even going to be my player of the series here. That one is going to go to Forge in the mid lane, who is in the mid lane here for Maple. I believe he was at the end of last week as well. I'm not sure if that is a, COVID thing. I know there's a lot of COVID stuff happening in the LCK right now as well. But I'm not sure if Forge is only there because Maple can't play, but whatever the reason, he has been a gigantic upgrade to Maple. Obviously, he was on loan to this team last year when they were Rogue Warriors, and he's back here this year, and he has been, quite frankly, he has been the spark that this team needed in order to kind of get their gears back. And he was awesome in this series. His game 2 on Akali was really, really good. And it was really, really difficult for them to deal with. Even his game 3 on Rise, his game 1, even when they lost, he was the driving force on that Akali that kept them in that game for as long as possible. He was basically 99% of their gold on the map. So Forge has actually been really consistently good for this Anyone's Legend team. He was really good in this series. But, like I said, Betty and Chocho actually played really well in that same vein. ZDZ and Xiao Hao were fine in the top lane. They're not anything spectacular. They're still some of the lower ones in the league. But that bottom half of the map, I think, has, quietly been decently good. I know Chocho's inted a couple times this year. And, that's what you're going to get from Chocho. But I think Forge and Betty, the 2 carry roles there, have been shockingly consistent and shockingly good overall. As for Ultra Prime, you really can't be losing series like this. It's a tough one to talk about because this team has been carried on their backs basically by Elk and Shousey the entire year. And this was definitely their worst performance of the year. When they don't pop off in that same vein, I think it's very difficult for this team to win. And that's kind of what we saw here. Cryan did his job in game 1. He was kind of the big focal factor. But outside of that, there was really no map pressure, especially in games 2 and 3. Hacker is going to be my dud of the series. He's gotten a couple of those this year because he has just been incredibly inconsistent when it comes to generating pressure for the rest of his team on the map. He is not really commanding any sort of advantage for his lanes, and when you have lanes that aren't typically going to be pushing all the time, you can't really fight for Crab topside because Zeus and Cryan aren't necessarily those pushing kind of players, and then Elk and Shousey are really good, especially in lane, but in this matchup, they're going into Betty and Chocho, who have also been quite good in lane. And so it just becomes, well, you have to create a little bit more by generating leads in the jungle, and that just didn't happen in this game. So, very tough situation here. Hacker, I think, has been massively disappointing this year. A big reason why this team, I think, overall has, I don't want to say underperformed, because a lot of people had them a little lower, but underperformed my expectations. I expected this team to be a playoff team going into the year. I said that there was a pretty big drop-off from them to, the non-playoff teams. And I believed that going into the year. I thought Cryan, Elk, Shousey, all of these players were underrated and good. And that's kind of proven to be at least okay, because Elk has had a great start to the year. Xiaoxi's had a great start to the year. Cryan has had moments, but man, that top side of the map has just been a little bit too weak for them to carry. And in this one, they had an off series, and unfortunately, nobody else was really able to pick that up. So a rough loss here for Ultra Prime. I don't think this is super indicative of exactly where they are, because like I said, I think Elk just played bad, and I don't think that's going to happen every series, because he's just been too good for over a year now for me to expect that this is his new form. But I want to give huge props to Anyone's Legend for being able to pull out a 2-1 series win here. I hope they can continue this form, because Forge and Betty together look like a real strong duo. Moving on to the second series here of day 2, we had Bilibili Gaming, BLG, taking on ThunderTalk Gaming. And this one, pretty much exactly as you would have expected, with BLG taking the easy 2-0 series win. Game 1 was a little long. They really couldn't find a way to close it out. They didn't have the best coordination in those late game team fights. Doggo just wasn't ahead enough to completely delete people. But in game 2, it was a lot cleaner, I think, overall from the whole team. But really, the star, I think, of this series in general has to be Weibo here for BLG. He's really been kind of the driving force, or the pulling away force for BLG this year. When they're good, it's because of Weibo. When they're bad, it's probably because of Weibo. And that can be good, that can be bad. In this series, it was very good. His Hecarim and Poppy were phenomenal. The Hecarim game in game 1, I mean, just complete map control. The Poppy game in game 2, I mean, talk about just, complete domination of the map. That is exactly how you play Poppy. I mean, there's a reason that this is one of my favorite picks in the jungle right now in the current meta. Because this pick can really just win you lanes pretty much by itself. But the top side of this map in general for BLG was just a really big strong point overall for them. Breathe had a fantastic series here. His game 2 on the Gwen, really, really, really nice. He was just better than New, which isn't going to be a surprise. It's arguably the best top laner in the region going against the worst. So, not too much of a surprise there. And then Fofo had a really good series here. 2 games of Orianna. They were good. Doggo and Crisp were fine. They weren't necessarily hindrances. I think if Doggo was a little bit more ahead in game 1, we're seeing a little bit more of a dominant win here from BLG. But, that's at that point, we're nitpicking, because this team still looked really, really confident throughout the entire series. I wasn't really concerned at any point. As for ThunderTalk, as for TT, let's first talk about, this is the first series that we have gotten to see them with Chieftain and UCal officially in the lineup here. So no more Frigid, no more Captain. It's now Chieftain and UCal in. They are officially in the roster. And it's a tough task to ask them to go up against BLG in their first series, but they didn't necessarily change much of the fortune. Puff and Southwind had started to build a little bit of a rapport, bot lane. Not that they didn't have a rapport. They've been playing together for 4 years now, but they started to kind of get some momentum going in that bot lane. That was completely stripped away in this game. They really had no impact on the entire game as a whole. Really, the only player who I think had impact on the game was Chieftain, and even then, Weibo just out-jungled him. It's not that Chieftain particularly had bad games, it was just Weibo was much better, and, you could theoretically say that this team is going to get better as the season progresses, but this, it certainly wasn't here in this series, but to ask them to go up against what is objectively one of the best teams in the league and hold their own, in their first ever series playing together, I think is a really big ask for this ThunderTalk team. New is going to be my dud of the series here. He was just completely outclassed by Breathe, pretty much in every aspect. He played 2 games of Camille here, one into Fiora and then one into Gwen. Those aren't terrible matchups for Camille, except maybe the Fiora matchup. That can be a little tough, but honestly, the Gwen matchup's not that bad for the Camille, and honestly, New just got bounced really, really badly. He's been a huge, huge weak point for this ThunderTalk team. He was really, really bad at the beginning of the year, and, I'm not going to say you need to, replace him, because I don't even think you have somebody to replace him with, but just definitely a weak side of that map. Hopefully, Chieftain and UCal can increase the floor that this team offers you, but right now, it's just not there. As for BLG, fine series, nothing really atrociously bad here. Nothing, they played really well. They were just the better team. They won 2-0 like they should have. Weibo dominated the map. Breathe dominated in lane. Fofo was really good. Doggo and Crisp were fine. They didn't do anything necessarily wrong. So, yeah, I mean, just overall a good series from BLG. Not too much to say about either side, though. Moving on to Series 3 here of Day 2, we had OMG taking on Victory 5. A 2-1 series here win here for Victory 5. OMG has been on a little bit of an upsurge recently. I think they've started to kind of get back a little bit on track. Abel's been playing better. I think Cold has been playing better. Aki has been playing better. But Victory 5 is just a little bit too good here for them to take the series. This was a really, really close one. Game 1 goes the way of OMG, basically on the back of Aki playing really well on this Graves jungle pick that we are just not seeing as much of anymore. We're still seeing it a little bit, but obviously not as much. Aki really pulls it out here in Game 1, does really well on it. With Cream on the Corki, you just have pretty much infinite scaling, Shen shields, Nautilus engage. You even have a Zeri if you really, really need it, so a really, really strong comp here in Game 1 from OMG if they can get to that late game, which they did. Game 2, kind of the opposite. Very early game focused comp here from Victory 5, and they're able to get a pretty big lead early and just kind of snowball that out of control here with the Nidalee, with the Renekton mid, the Aurelia top lane. Really just got to the point where it was untouchable because Zeri got to the point where she couldn't die. Photic had a really good series, by the way, and then Game 3 was a blast. To boil it down, we're at the end of the game, and Ace from OMG, instead of going for Soul, they try to end the game. They don't time it right. Victory 5 gets up in time, aces them back, and then goes on to win the game. So a very, very close one here. OMG basically had it in the palm of their hands. If they go for Soul there, I think OMG wins this series, which is a really tough pill to swallow, but it's also a really good sign that OMG is able to go kind of toe-to-toe with Victory 5, who is, a pretty decently good team here. But you got to give a big shout-out to Rookie, who is my player of the series here. That Corki game in Game 3 was really the big deciding factor for them winning or losing this series. He was able to, I think, actually one-shot Abel. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure he hit one big rocket on Abel, and he just died. That sucks. Obviously, pre-nerf Corki is disgusting, and Rookie takes full effect of that. We're going to ignore his Game 1 on the Twisted Fate, which was quite poor. But, the games 2 and 3 were really strong. He was the focal point, I think, early game in Game 2, and then late game, he was just able to kind of carry that team fight and keep the game alive for Victory 5. But want to give a big shout out to Photic, who also had a really good series. He had a great Game 2 on Zeri, and he even had a really good Game 3 here on the Senna. Just not as much of a show-off Game 3. Obviously, on the Senna, you're not going to have those kinds of performances, but still a really good Game 3 here, I would say, overall. Rich is also playing a lot better. I think that's really the big change that Victory 5 is having right now, as opposed to, I think, what a lot of people projected in the preseason, is that Rich is actually performing really, really well. This is a guy who struggled pretty heavily on Nongshim last year in the LCK. Coming over from Heroes of the Storm, people thought that he was just, never going to be good enough to play at, like, the highest level in terms of League of Legends, but he kind of gets his mojo back, his confidence back. He was originally on, more tank side, weak side duties, but they're starting to put him on some carries. The Aurelia game in Game 2 was really fun to watch, and then the Graves game in Game 3 was really, really strong against Shanji. Honestly, I thought he had a really good series overall, but for OMG, Aki played really well. I think that really is the big takeaway for OMG, is just how well Aki played going into Karsa here. Aki was arguably the better jungler in this series. He had complete control. They got almost all of the objectives, even in Game 3 where it was particularly close. If they would have just made the call to go for that soul, it really would have been, game over. But Aki had a fantastic series. He solo killed Rookie, for heaven's sake. I mean, he had a fantastic, fantastic series. I can't say anything bad about Aki in this one. He tried his best to win the series for his team, but someone who didn't have quite a good series here was going to be Shanji in the top lane. He's my dud of the series. He really started off the year hot. People were really high on him coming into the year. He had a really good week 1. He had a good Demacia Cup. Ever since then, he has definitely trended downwards, and I think that's just kind of the natural progression for rookies. You come in with the hype, people maybe underestimate you a little bit, and you got to get to show what you're going to do. You have to remember in week 1 when this team was dominating as well, they were playing much weaker competition. Their schedule has gotten much harder since then. They played some of the bottom teams in the first week, and so that 3-0 was maybe a little bit deceiving, but Shanji has, been a little bit disappointing, I think, since then. He hasn't necessarily been bad, but you see the Shen pick, the Sion pick, the Gragas pick. He is really being put on this weak side duty, and he honestly got taken advantage of in lane by Rich this entire series, basically games 1, 2, and 3, even when they won in game 1. So definitely not the series to cheer about for Shanji, but, OMG showed a lot of fight in this one. I think Cream had a good series. I think Abel had a good series. Unfortunately, just got obliterated there in that game 3. And then Cold pulls out the support of Mumu, and no matter where that doesn't really feel like it's a thing anymore, so that's kind of cool. Overall, just, interesting team comp from OMG. They were this close to taking down Victory 5. If they were to have picked up this win, I think we'd be completely talking different, but it's hard for me to really punish them for this loss. And then V5 is, you have to, commend them for being able to win the game. Even if it was kind of on OMG that they were still able to win it, you still have to take advantage of the opportunities that you're given, and they absolutely did. Rookie had a great series, so did Fodic, and so did Rich. The carry roles are doing really, really well for V5 right now, and I expect that to continue onward. It's just about whether or not these guys can kick it up into that next gear. Rookie currently is, but can Rich and Fodic kind of kick that up into next gear where they can really become a contender? That's really what we're going to have to wait and see. Moving on to the first series here of day 3, and that was EDG Edward Gaming taking on Team WE, a battle of former kind of pseudo-sister organizations, EDG kind of getting birthed out of some WE players back in the day, and WE not doing so hot in this one. There's definitely a little bit of a different league state for, I think, both of these teams than they're used to. EDG is very much on top, and WE is very much on bottom. They dominate this one. It was never, I guess it was kind of interesting, but it was never close, I guess you could say. Game 1 certainly was not close. Game 1 was pretty dominant, I think, from EDG pretty much across the board. Viper just gets super fed on the Jinx, and the game is over. Game 2 was a lot closer. There were some interesting facets. Bubu actually getting a couple solo kills. Game 2 was easily Bubu's best game of the year, which is surprising, coming against arguably the best team in the LPL, but it ended up not mattering. Bot diff was just too big at that point. EDG takes the win. Viper is my player of the series. He was dominant in this one. 2 games of Jinx. You kind of know that Viper's going to dominate if you give him 2 games of Jinx. Also, you're going into the worst bot lane in the LPL. The worst bot lane that has been the worst bot lane all year long. So, yeah, I don't really know how much more you could have expected here. Viper and Mako just completely tore them apart. They were the dominant duo in this one. And I don't want to say like they solo won both games, but there were certainly a little bit of rough moments on EDG that Viper and Mako just made all right. JJ had some interesting moments. Flandre getting solo killed a couple times by Bubu is interesting, but he ended up being super relevant in team fights, especially on that Gwen in game 2, so it ended up being fine. I thought Scout had a really interesting series here. He was really consistent, which he has been all year long. You play the Twisted Fate, you play the Lissandra, you're playing for team play. I like what Scout brings to this team. I think he's basically the perfect mid laner to have with players like Viper and JJ, who are a little bit more aggressive. To have a guy like Scout who is just willing to, I don't want to say sacrifice his lane, because he's certainly still one lane. But, to be a little bit more giving, and to play picks like the Lissandra, which I just don't think we're seeing a lot of players play, to maybe be a little bit more, obviously it's a counter pick in LeBlanc. I'm not going to say that it's, not also for lane, but it's, in team fights, that's a really supportive pick, typically. It's just good to have a player like Scout on the team. So, yeah, honestly, EDG's just clicking. This is exactly the kind of form that you would have hoped and expected to see from them coming into 2022, coming off of a World Championship. They just look like, even when they do struggle, they can perfectly cover each other's weaknesses. So, I'm not super worried about EDG, although it is going into WE. And let's talk about WE again. I guess they're bad. I really have nothing else to say. They're bad. They're 0-6. They haven't really looked good at all. They're 2-12 at this point. They have had 0 bright spots, I think, all year long. It's just hard for me to say anything other than this team has not a lot of upside. Like I said, Bubu had by far his best game of the year on the Akali in game 2, but that's not saying much because he's been, quite frankly, atrocious for most of the year. He just happened to perform really good in this one. Shanks, on the other hand, had his worst series of the year. He was not good on the LeBlanc. He basically accomplished nothing. Obviously, he gets counterpicked pretty hard in game 2 with the Lissandra. That is like the counterpick to LeBlanc. But still, even so, not a great series. And then a pretty typically bad series here from the bot lane, who just doesn't seem to have any sort of pressure here. Jing is going to be my dud of the series here for WE. This bot lane just got completely outclassed. They were worse in pretty much every aspect. Viper abused Jing. They have a couple of AD carries on this roster. None of them really feel like they have any sort of upside or potential. I just, like I said in the earlier one for WE, I don't know where this team is exactly going. It's a quote-unquote rebuild year for WE, but it doesn't feel like a lot of the players on their team are pieces that you feel like you can rebuild with. This very much just feels like a bad like a bad team that needs to do a complete overhaul and go into next year with players that at least have some semblance of potential and upside that you feel like you can build around. Because right now it just feels like you don't have any of those players on your roster. I'm very concerned for WE. and their relevance, at least for the recent, in upcoming seasons. But, right now they're garbage. And EDG is really good. I guess the 2-0 really shouldn't be a surprise, but yeah, this very well could be the best team in the league, absolutely destroying the worst team in the league. Moving on to Series 2 here of Day 3, we had Weibo Gaming taking on FunPlus Phoenix, a battle of two teams that are kind of battling for that upper tier of playoff contention, and Weibo is actually able to narrowly take out the 2-1 series win here. Weibo's been on a really big hot streak. They obviously haven't changed a ton from last year when they kind of disappointed everybody on Suning, but the Shy has come in, and the Shy has kind of really returned to form. He had some rough games to start off the series, which we'll get to. Game 1 was really strong, I think, overall from Weibo. Just in general, I think across the board, they had a really good performance. Huan Fong had a good Jinx game. Angel had a good Orianna game. The Shy was fine on Malphite, et cetera, right? Game 2 was definitely FPX's game. Gory popped off on the Orianna. This might be Gory's best game all year long. Obviously, Gory's gotten a lot of shit from the community, I think, overall in the past year. He had a really good one here in Game 2. He was a big reason why that FPX team was actually able to take that win. The Shy on that Lucian, his classic Lucian top pick, that did not work. It did not work at all in this one. I can definitely say that was a miss in Game 2 here. And then Game 3, very close back and forth here for a couple of reasons, but Weibo is able to pull it out in the end. Angel had a really good game here on the Victor. The Shy was really good on the Kennen. Great positioning from Huan Fong on the Jinx overall. SOFM, yes, he missed smites, and I guess this is where I start getting into Weibo, generally speaking. SOFM, yes, he missed smites. He unfortunately wasn't able to get a lot of the objectives. Actually played those team fights basically perfectly on the Viego. I know a lot of people are going to be criticizing him for his inability to get objectives and win smites, but that is a big part of the jungler's job, but you have to also understand that this guy is doing so much for this team in team fights that it's not like he's just playing bad, right? He's missing a part of the game, but he is not playing the game in a way that is quite actively losing his team games. He is still being an overall positive, I think, for this Weibo team, and he certainly was in this series. He's had a couple of series that he's been bad, and a couple of series where he's been really, really good. This one, I think he was a little bit of both. But Angel is actually going to be my player of the series. Angel is a really interesting player because he is someone who I think has, at times, looked really good and at times looked really bad. But he was really good this series. The Victor game in Game 3 was really strong. The Orianna game in Game 1 was really strong. He's kind of been on a little bit of a hot streak recently, what with Weibo heating up. And I hope to see that continue. If Angel can kind of get back onto the form he was in 2020, rather than anything we saw out of him in 2021, I think that's going to be a lot better for Weibo in general. And then actually my dud of the series is going to be on Weibo, which might be a little bit surprising, but I just didn't have the heart to give it to anybody on FPX because honestly, everybody on FPX played rather well. So the dud of the series actually is on. He was probably the worst performing member of both teams in the series. He has certainly been an interesting case this year because there are times where he's looked really good, but it just doesn't seem like him and Huan Fong have a ton of synergy together. I think that is the way I would put it. The Tom Kench games in games 1 and 2 were fine. You don't really do much on Kench. His game 1 honestly wasn't that good. He died a lot. And then the game 3 on Rakan, man, some of those engages were very, very questionable. But overall, generally speaking, he was fine. It's just probably the worst player on the Rift in this one. For FPX, you held close in this one. I'm not exactly sure where this team's power level is, like where they are in the power rankings, what their skill is. They just seem to be constantly flip-flopping back and forth between being like a top 4 team, 5 team in the league, and being like a top 8 team in the league. I don't know exactly where they fall into that category because we're going to really have to see how good Weibo is when they start playing some other good teams. FPX is able to keep up with some of the best teams in the world, but they're really never able to pull out the gigantic victories, although they always take care of the teams that are on that tier below, right? The Victory 5s, the OMGs, right? The top esports. These are the wins that FPX, I think have been consistently able to pick up, but unfortunately they're just not able to break through that upper echelon. So it'll be interesting to see exactly, what happens with FPX. I thought overall they played a pretty good series here, especially Gory, like I said in that game 2, although his games 1 and 3 were pretty tragic, not so good. Everybody is complaining about the LWX build on Kaisa in game 3. Yeah, I think it's a weird build, but I think that there are weirder builds that we've seen in competitive. And like I always say on this channel, you can win a game with a bad build if you are the better player. Even in pro. I know builds are something that we can tangibly look at and criticize and say, this is bad, and, we can feel like we're having that impact as an audience member, but truthfully speaking, if LWX was really having that much of an impact here, it wouldn't matter that he went collector first item and didn't hit his spike fast enough or whatever, right? He didn't have the attack speed. Whatever you want to say for LWX, right? I don't actually think that the build matters as much. And maybe that's just my opinion, but I don't know. I think at least in comparison to how you actively play the game, your build is important, but not as important as your positioning, or things like that. And if you have good positioning, it's hard for me to consider you like a dud of the series, which LWX did everything he could in the game itself. They just couldn't win the team fights. But yeah, everybody on FPX played fine, I think here. Just not a series they could pull out a win in. As for Weibo, this is a series that they absolutely needed to win to kind of build confidence. This is kind of a season-defining moment here because this pushes them into, we're questioning now if they're in that upper echelon, right? The Shy has really performed. He had a great Kennen game, and he was really the big question mark coming into the year. Angel's kind of getting on track. Huanfeng is still Huanfeng. His positioning and team fighting is really good. It's really just, SOFM has a couple of questionable moments around objectives, and then On needs to really step up his game in terms of consistency. But outside of that, this team really is looking fantastic, especially in those carry roles. Moving on to Series 3 here of Day 3, we had RNG, Royal Never Give Up, taking on Top Esports. And a pretty solid win here for RNG, I think, generally speaking here. A 2-0 win. Game 1 was super duper close, and really Top should have won it. Jackie Love had a lot of gold. Honestly, Tian had a lot of gold. Oh, I should note, Top Esports actually made a few roster changes for this one. If you haven't seen midweek, they did go ahead and sign Mark. He was a free agent. Nobody had picked him up at this point, and so Top says, well, Zhuo's not really working out for us at the beginning of this year. We're going to bring him in. We're also going to bring in Wayward in the top lane. He's, fine. We'll see if he can be better than Zoom. And then Tian comes in, probably because of the synergy with Wayward. Maybe that's why Wayward's in, is because maybe Zoom and Tian don't play together particularly well, or I don't really know what the issue would be there, but Tian does come in for Zhao Pang, so a couple of roster moves here for Top Esports going into the series, but they play really rather well, honestly. Tian and Jackie Love do get decently far ahead. It's actually just Xiaohu late game that really makes a difference, that Corki pick, as we have seen throughout pretty much the entire split so far. Corki has been really nuts in the late game, and Xiaohu especially has been really phenomenal. And then game 2 was just Xiaohu from beginning to end on that rise. He is clearly my player of the series here. He was phenomenal, and he's been phenomenal all year long. He really has to be the favorite, I think, at this point, or at least at this point in the season, to be the MVP come, the end of spring. And yes, I know, spring tiger, right? But it is the year of the tiger, so overall. So maybe we are getting a full year of good Xiaohu this year. That would be phenomenal, I think, for RNG. But the level that he has been at for the past, I'd say, 18 months has really been unmatched by almost anybody in the LPL. He went to top lane, he role swapped to top lane, and was the best top laner in the world. And now he's back in the mid lane and arguably the best player in the LPL, period, full stop. He really gapped Knight this series, I think, overall. Just a great year in series overall, I think, from Xiaohu. Gala, Ming, Wei, all played really well. Bin had some questionable moments. I think he was 0-0-0 until 25 minutes on the Camille game in game 2, which is, I guess, a way to play the game. I guess you are in Renekton, so you're not necessarily going to be fighting early, but it's just kind of funny that that's where you go with it late. But yeah, RNG looks good. This looks like a really solid team. I'm not going to say that they're favorites to win the Spring Split or anything right now, but man, Xiaohu is looking like a monster, and I'm not sure that, generally speaking, this team has any sort of glaring weakness, right? I think top lane has been exploited a couple times this year so far, but Bin, on paper, should be one of the better top laners in the league, so we'll see, if that really becomes an issue. But as for Top Esports, like I said, they made a ton of roster changes going into this one. I'm not sure if that was a good move or a bad move. Obviously, the roster that was constructed for Top was entirely based around Knight. Knight chooses to stay so that he can play with his friends. He can play with Zoom. He can play with Tian. He can play with Zhuo, all of whom are really good friends with Knight. And Knight's honestly not performed up to expectation or up to Knight's expectation this year. He's, we always think of Knight as this dominant lane player that, you know, is a great team fighter and can solo win games basically for his team. He has certainly not been that this year. At best, I think he's been a mid-tier mid laner. And I think that's not the best sign to look at. He's actually my dud of the series here. He got gapped by Xiaohu. There's really no other way to say it. He got pretty hard gapped by Xiaohu. The Sylas in Game 1 didn't work. The Victor in Game 2 certainly didn't work. There were just times where it looks like he's mentally checked out. I'm not sure if that's because of the roster moves and maybe, you know, them taking out some of his friends. Like, Zhuo's not in the lineup anymore. I'm not sure if, you know... I really don't know what the reasoning could be, but he really hasn't been good at all this year, period. So, you know, whatever the issue is, he's got to figure it out soon because he has to kind of be that guy here. Right now, it really is JackeyLove. JackeyLove's the guy who is doing a lot of good plays, I think, for top esports. Yes, he's making a lot of bad plays as well, but at least he's trying to make plays. I feel like at points in time, he's really the only one trying to attempt anything on this top esports team that is slowly just bleeding out and dying. Tion coming in really hasn't changed anything. Letting go Karsa and bringing in Tion has certainly been a downgrade. They have to figure out the top lane situation. Zoom is definitely better than Wayward, but I don't know. Maybe Zoom just can't play with Tion. In that case, I would just keep Zoom and Xiaopeng. I think they're a much better duo, I think, overall. And then bringing Mark in, I do think he's probably an upgrade to Zhuo. It definitely didn't show in this series, but I think you give him a little bit more time with JackeyLove. I expect that duo to be better. Playstyle-wise, I think Mark is a much better fit for JackeyLove, where they can just be super aggressive all the time, want to go in and want to fight, do all those things. I think that there's a chance that that duo could work out in the long run. Obviously, going up against RNG, it's a tough test in you know, Series 1, but that really is kind of the positive that I take away from TES. But RNG with another really solid win. If they continue like this, they really do have a shot to be one of the teams that hoists the LPL trophy and heads to MSI at the end of the split. It's just about whether or not the weak pieces on their team, quote-unquote weak pieces, right? Bin and Wei, you know, who have still been good, but, you know, they've kind of been not as good as the rest of the team. Can they step up and be championship-level pieces by the end of spring? That really is the question at this point. That's going to bring us into our final day of LPL Week 4 action, Day 4 here, which was kicked off by Rare Adam taking on Anyone's Legend. A 2-1 series win here for Anyone's Legend, and they actually go 2-0 this week, which is pretty huge for this roster. Not only do they go 2-0, they go 2-0 against two opponents that I think a lot of people had expectations for, maybe at least going into the year. Obviously, Ultra Prime, I had a little bit higher expectations for than Rare Adam. But Rare Adam, I think a lot of other people maybe had a lot of high expectations for, and Anyone's Legend is able to kind of beat them pretty clearly here. I want to give a big shout out overall on AL's side to Xiao Hao and Betty, because holy crap, did those two play really well this series. Did they link up well? I think they played really well together. 3 games of Lee Sin, 3 games of Jinx. If that's what it takes for this team to really, like, click, I mean, do it every game. That's all I need to know. If this is the top 10 in Korean solo queue Xiao Hao that we've been hearing about forever, but has never really shown up on stage for me, then keep that around. And Betty's honestly been the most underrated player in the LPL this year. I don't even think that's really that much of a debate. He's been fantastic for this Anyone's Legend team in the LPL this year. It's just no one's really paying attention because Anyone's Legend has been so bad up to this point. But 2 really solid wins here that's going to catapult them up in my power rankings, at least personally. Just a really good series overall. Forge coming into the team still very much feels like an upgrade. He had a really good Orianna game in Game 1, a really good LeBlanc game in Game 3. Just overall, a really good series for Anyone's Legend and a big kind of turning point. I think Chocho has really started to get back on track. He started to make less of those, like, what are you doing plays, and just the aggression feels a little bit more sustainable than maybe it did at the beginning of the year. And while ZDZ, like I said, he's not the power point of the map, he doesn't have to be, right? He's playing Ornn, he's playing Jax, right? He can kind of sit on this island and be a problem late game if he's on the Jax, or just be a really good frontliner on the Ornn. He can be a weak side player, and I think that's exactly what Anyone's Legend wants to do. And they're kind of pushing for that, and I think it's working out really well for them. As for Rare Adam, this is, you know, regrettably where I kind of expected them to be at this point in the year. I know a lot of people had high expectations for this team, but if you go and look back at my power rankings, my preseason power rankings, I just didn't see it with this roster. Even, you know, I still think that they aren't playing that their best possible roster. I think Leon being in the jungle here is still not the best possible thing that they could have here. But, you know, they're still not performing. I don't think that would change everything, right? Leon had a bad series, definitely. He pulls out his signature Kiana in Game 3 and gets absolutely dumpstered on it. iBoy gets dumpstered the 3 games of Zeri, and this is kind of the thing with Zeri, right, is when that champion is ahead, that champion does need a level of support. That champion's not just something you can pick and then when you get to the late game, it'll carry. It's not an Aphelios. It's not a Jinx, right? Where you get to that point in the game and, it's, Zeri's going to win you the game. You have to have a level of support from the rest of your team to be able to get Zeri ahead. And if that doesn't happen, Zeri is very close to useless. And if you don't have the positioning and the dodge mechanics to, stop yourself from getting CC'd and getting pinned down, like, you're just going to die instantly. And that's what happened to Weibo in this series. He's my dud of the series. These were 3 not good games of Zeri. Even in game 2, it was not so good. So, not a huge fan of what Weibo did in this one. Him and Leon and Uyanja have been not good. Cube has not been good. Really, Strive was the only player in the series who played even remotely okay. And even then, I don't think Strive played particularly well. I still think he got outplayed by Forge, who, ironically, is on this team because of Rare Atom. I think Forge would be an upgrade to Strive, and Forge is now dominating for anyone's legend after being a Rare Atom player. So, yeah, not good for Rare Atom there as a look, but overall, just a rough year so far from Rare Atom. I do think they need to make some changes. I think they have players in the organization that would be upgrades. Hopefully they just go to them sooner rather than later. And then for anyone's legend, I mean, they had a great week, but you have to remember they are beating non-playoff teams. I still don't think this team is anywhere near playoff contention yet, at least until they start beating teams that are in that kind of sphere. But man, Betty is playing some of the best League of Legends he's played in years. And Xiao Hao's really starting to come into his own with Forge there. They've developed a nice mid-jungle synergy. If this team can continue on that role, I think they're probably a lot closer to what we see, a team like Invictus Gaming at right now than maybe a team like WE or LGD like we had originally thought, kind of the past couple weeks. Moving on to the second series here of day 4, we had Invictus Gaming taking on Victory 5. A 2-1 win here for V5 after a shaky game 1 and some shaky moments in games 2 and 3, even though they were pretty dominant wins, still some interesting outcomes. Game 1 was a slaughter. Game 1 was not even remotely close. June and Zika have paired up on this Invictus Gaming team, and when they are together, they are on fire. I think bringing Zika in here over Neni, who really had a rough start to the year, has been a huge improvement for this Invictus Gaming team. It's really helped June kind of explode a little bit, and Zika obviously has really been a big improvement in the top lane. But games 2 and 3 were rather trivial, with Karsa playing Lee Sin in both games and just kind of dominating the map. Karsa is easily the player of the series here. His Jarvan game in game 1 definitely left stuff to be desired into the Nidalee, which I think in certain cases can be a good matchup, but in this one it certainly was not. But the Lee Sin games in games 2 and 3 were dominant. He was the best player on the Rift in this series, no questions asked. When Karsa's playing like this, I have a hard time believing that Victory 5 is ever going to be in danger of losing a game, even against some of the top teams. And we're going to find that out in their upcoming schedule. I believe they have EDG, RNG, and LNG in 3 of their next 4. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see where this Victory 5 team ends up. But let's talk about this one a little bit more. Karsa and Rookie together. I think that duo has really been like the duo for Victory 5. When they win games, it's those two stepping up. Photic can be hit or miss. When he hits, obviously this team has a huge power player there, but when he misses, he can be kind of bad, and it was a little bit of a miss this series. 2 games of Senna, though, so it's not really too bad. You can only miss so much on the Senna, but really this series for V5 was about Karsa and about Rookie playing really well, especially Rookie in that game 3 on the Syndra. Rookie making a case for MVP as well with Xiaohu there, with Tarzan, who's also going to be in that conversation. Viper as well going to be in that conversation. These two have just really paired up, and they're going to make Victory 5 a dominant team. Rich had a much worse series here than I think he did earlier in the week. I'm not super worried. 2 games of Poppy do have me a little bit concerned because it's just a champion I don't think is particularly good in laning phase, especially against a Tryndamere. That just seems like a bad matchup overall, I think, for the Poppy. But, I think either way, Rich does probably need to perform a little bit better. He did stop the game from ending, so that's good against the Tryndamere trying to take Nexus, which is, just Tryndamere things. But either way, whatever you want to say, it ended up working out for Victory 5. They ended up coming away with the win. Karsa and Rookie are a big part of that, especially Karsa, who was really good. As for Invictus Gaming, they're honestly on the up and up for me. I think, like I said, this team with Zika and On, I think in it, feels better than it did with than it did with Neni and Xiao Yueji. I think On being my dud of the series here kind of puts a little bit of that into question, but just because I think he wasn't necessarily great this series here, especially on the Aphelios games. That doesn't necessarily think that I don't think that the team is better off having him in. I think this team needs a little bit of time to gel, right? On and Lucas haven't had a ton of time to play together. Zika was given pretty much all of the attention this series. On was basically left on a complete island here for Invictus Gaming, which, what else is new in Invictus? AD carry left on a complete island, but he was left on a complete island and he was taken advantage of in this series by the jungle. And that's just sometimes how the cookie crumbles. So On is my dud of the series, but it's hard to blame him too much. Like I said, Jun, and Zika were pretty much together 24/7. So, except for endgame, when Zika was just in a lane by himself, split pushing to end. As Tryndamere does, hashtag just Tryndamere things. So, yeah, overall, a decent series here from Invictus. Not a ton to talk about, but they were fine. They held their own, and I think they're on the up and up. I'm curious to see what they're going to do against teams kind of closer to their skill level. Teams kind of like Ultra Prime and like Anyone's Legend. I'm curious to see how they match up against teams like that. But as for Victory 5, you definitely needed this win. I never really mentioned this, but Rookie in his first series against Invictus does get the dub against the club that he really fostered into a World Championship contender and, a World Championship winner. So Rookie gets the last laugh there, and Victory 5 gets a win that kind of solidifies their momentum moving forward. That's going to bring us to our final series here of Week 4, which was Bilibili Gaming, BLG, taking on LNG Esports here. A very close 3-game set that is taken by LNG. Whoever got the lead early, whoever was able to get that advantage, really never let it go in any 3 of these games. LNG was able to do that. In Game 1, it was BLG off the back of Weibo, getting pretty strong on the Xin Zhao and then just kind of carrying that advantage over to the rest of his team. In Game 2, it was certainly Light on the Zeri. Light is one of, Zeri, like I said, it's a pick that it does need a little bit of support to get online, but once it does get online, it is almost impossible to actually deal with. That's really the thing with Zeri is it is kind of, you can't get online by yourself, but once you get there, you can win the game. And that's kind of what happened here in Game 2 with Light. And then Game 3, Tarzan had a fantastic game here on the Lee Sin, kind of taking over the whole map, getting Light ahead. Lumao was really, really, really good in Game 3. And then so was Doenby on the Galio. Pretty much a pick that I think we're going to see a lot out of him this year with how this team likes to play. Let's talk about LNG, an overall really good series. My player of the series is just barely going to go to Light here. It could go to Tarzan, could go to Doenby. Honestly, you could theoretically give it to Lumao for that Game 3, although his Game 2 was definitely a little questionable at points. Just a good series overall from LNG. They looked really good here. Light has definitely taken a step up this year. I still think that maybe he looks better than he would on a different team than he would here on LNG. Like, if you switch like Light and Elk, do I think that the performances would be that much different from either of them? Probably not. I think Light would probably do as well as Elk is doing right now on Ultra Prime, and I think Elk would probably do as well as Light is doing on LNG, if that makes any sort of sense. I think Light's a good player. I just don't know if he's in that same category as, like, the top tier, ADCs in the region that I think some people are maybe putting him into right now. Tarzan, however, is phenomenal. He's been phenomenal all year long. He's been phenomenal his entire career. He had another really good series here. That Lee Sin game in Game 3 was really important. Big reason why they won this series. Doenby is just phenomenal in this meta, I think, overall. I think Tank Rise as a pick for Doenby is something that is just, it seems perfect for him. Playstyle-wise, he can kind of roam around the map. He can sacrifice resources because the build isn't all that expensive. And he can be a menace for the enemy team. He can set up his teammates to really do a lot, which he did in that Game 2 for the Zeri. And then Lumao actually had a phenomenal Game 3. His Lux is really, really good. The champions that I think, he's always been an Enchanter player. I've never really considered Lumao to be a great Engage player. I mean, he had a good 2020, but outside of that, he really hasn't, like, the engagement has really never been his specialty. It's really been when he's able to get his hands on champs that can kind of hit skill shots from range and then follow up that CC with something else. I think the Karma's going to be a heavy pick for him. Obviously the Morgana was a pick for him in solo queue for a long time, but the Lux game here in Game 3 was phenomenal. I don't know how much of that's the matchup because obviously you're going into a Samira and your Lux Caitlyn, you're going to obliterate that Samira, but overall just a really good win for LNG. They stay undefeated. They are for sure one of the best teams in the league and in the world. For BLG, a little bit of a rough loss here. My dud of the series is tentatively going to go to Weibo here. Weibo was kind of the big reason they won this game in Game 1 on the back of that Xin Zhao, but he was not so good in Games 2 and 3. Really, the big problem for Weibo is, I think, consistency, and that's kind of been his problem his whole career, is that there will be games where he completely takes over and he is a huge asset to his team, but he also has these games that are just huge question marks. And that's kind of especially what we got in Game 3 here, where he just got taken advantage of by Tarzan, quite frankly. The Lee Sin Xin Zhao matchup isn't one that I think is particularly bad. It's one that Weiwei won pretty hard in Game 1 and then just lost it pretty hard in Game 3. So not really sure what the deal was there. A lot of people are complaining about Doggo picking the Samira here into Caitlyn, Lux, Galio. Lee Sin, like you're never really going to get on top of anybody. And I do understand that. I definitely get the idea that Doggo, Samira here isn't going to be the thing. But I think there are bigger problems here in Game 3. The last pick, Jace, I don't think is necessarily a good thing. I think Fofo building tank on Ryze after you're down so much gold and you really don't have a power point on the map isn't necessarily the direction I would have went. Overall, I definitely think that BLG showed in this series that they're not on the same level as a team like LNG. I'd put EDG in that category, obviously, as well. And I think RNG is making a strong case to be in that category, in that same vein. BLG just maybe looks like, I don't want to say a tier down, but maybe like half a tier down from those teams, right? They're going to consistently be able to beat the teams that are below them, but maybe not be able to beat the top teams. Kind of similar to what Rare Atom was last year, where they stomped the lower tier teams and they look absolutely dominant against them, but when it comes to facing the best teams in the region, they just don't have the firepower to compete. Maybe that changes if Uzi comes in and plays. I don't know when that's going to be for Uzi, but whenever it is, maybe that does change. If it never happens, obviously then they have faith in Doggo and Crisp to kind of be that long-term duo here in the bot lane. I'm not saying that it's similar to like JJ and Clearlove from last year, but remember at the beginning of last year, everybody was so excited for Clearlove to be coming back to EDG, but JJ just kind of played his way into that role permanently. I'm not saying Doggo's going to do the same thing here, but, it'll be interesting to see what direction they go there. Outside of that, pretty decent series here from BLG overall. Just LNG played a lot better. Light and Tarzan have really been the guys on LNG this year. Doanby has been, one of the perfect supporting players. He hasn't really been the focal point, like the flashy playmaker like he was on FPX last year especially, but he's really helped Tarzan become one of the best, if not the best jungler in the league, and then Light is having the best year of his career as well, thanks to, Doanby. Lumao has helped a lot with that as well, so LNG's just kind of firing on all cylinders right now, and I expect them to continue that as the season progresses. They're one of the best teams in the world. All right, that is going to do it. That was my Week 4 overview and analysis for the LPL. On the left hand of your screen right now, you are going to be seeing the current LPL standings from 1 to 17 with both series records and match records. On the right, you are going to see my personal power rankings with any sort of changes from last week listed next to it. Let's go over who rose and fell this week in the power rankings. The top 4 staying unchanged. I think I got that pretty spot on. There, EG, LNG, RNG, and BLG, I think, are the top 4 teams. Weibo jumping into the top 5, though, and Victory 5 jumping into the top 6 with FPX dropping down to 7. Weibo had a really good week here, and then Victory 5 also going 2-0 this week. FPX, they still look good, but they just need to show a little bit more consistency. I think they have a few more flaws than Weibo and V5, personally. JD Gaming leapfrogging top. I think TES just didn't play as good as they should this week, and pretty much all season long. They're going to keep falling if they don't figure something out. They're almost out of the playoffs here. I mean, they are in terms of standings, but, if they don't turn it around soon, they might not even make playoffs. And then OMG kind of leapfrogging Ultra Prime here. Ultra Prime with a kind of a questionable loss here to anyone's legend. So OMG just a little bit more consistent for me. I think they have a little bit more upside. They're going to leapfrog them. Although I think 10 and 11 are pretty interchangeable for me right now. And then you've got that clump of 12 and 13, both rising here. Invictus Gaming going up 1. Anyone's legend with their 2-0 week going up to 13. I think this is probably about where they are. I don't think I would expect them to be anywhere higher than this. I don't want to overrate this 2-0 week. Just remember they beat Rare Atom and they beat Ultra Prime. So it's not like they had like a dominant week where they beat, EGG and LNG in the same week or anything like that. This is still a team that definitely has problems, and we're going to have to see if they're anywhere close to playoffs, actually, because they really haven't looked that good up to this year outside of Betty. But Rare Atom obviously falling, a pretty not good week for them. LGD and ThunderTalk also falling, but only really because anyone's legend is jumping up so far. So those are the changes in the power rankings. My player of the week for week 4 in the LPL is going to go to Betty on anyone's legend. He's been phenomenal all series long, or all year long, I should say. But this week, really, we saw the full extent of that. He was probably my player of the week in the LPL. And my dud of the week this week is going to go to Jing. on Team WE. WE is just a complete train wreck right now. They need to change things up and fast. They are easily the worst team in the LPL as it's constructed right now, and they have to figure something out because right now it is just not working. So a pair of 80 carries as my player of the week in Betty, and then my dud of the week in Zhang on WE. That is going to do it. If you guys enjoyed, please go ahead and leave a like down below. It really does help the channel more than you know. Let me know what your series of the week was, your player of the week, your dud of the week, all that fun stuff down in the comments. You know I love interacting with you guys and talking it up with you guys down in the comment section below, but I hope you're having a wonderful day. I hope you continue to have a wonderful day, and I will see you all later.